Purnima, is my voice all right?
Yes, sir.
You can hear? Oh, no blurring?
Yes, sir.
Huh?
No, sir, no blurring. Absolutely clear.
Okay, thank you. Sanjay, can you make me and Purnima host? Sanjay? Sanjay, can you make me co-host?
Yes, sir. Tejinder, Dr. Jamkar here.
Hello, sir.
I'm in US.
Oh.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I think Professor Ram Narayan is also in US.
Yes. सर आपका लेक्चर हो और तो बहुत लोग आएंगे.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, Dr. Tejinder.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Anji. Good evening, Dr. Pandya.
Yeah, good evening.
क्या हो गया?
Hello.
Hello. Good evening, Dr. Jamkar,
Good evening.
Dr. Sanjay,
Hello, ma'am.
Swapnil, Purnima, all of you, hello.
Yeah, hello, ma'am. How are you?
Hello, madam.
Good, good.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Tejinder sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening to everyone.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Dr. Adkoli.
Thank you.
Actually, I am in US, so it's good morning here.
Nice to see Dr. Arun Jamkar after a long time.
Yeah, thank you. Why don't you run your video so that we can also have your darshan?
Yeah, till the time at least we start off.
Yeah, then depending upon connectivity.
हाँ बेटा हाँ बेटा
Shall we wait?
I think we can start.
We can start, yes.
Yes. So today is a very red letter day for MU India. I mean, Tejinder Sir himself is here to deliver the Dr. Rita Sood oration and receive the Lifetime Achievement Award. Over to you, Dr. Purnima.
Thank you, sir. Is the screen visible?
No,
yes.
Go full screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we gather here this evening for Project Samman, MU India initiative. And we have amidst us today doyen, an authority, an influencer, a mentor, a name that has not escaped the mind and mouth of probably any of the health professions educator across the globe. I feel extremely proud and privileged to welcome Tejinder Singh sir, as well as introduce him today, as he's going to deliver the Dr. Rita Sood Memorial Oration, as well as receive the Lifetime Achievement Award. Professor Tejinder Singh, TS sir as we call him, TS sir has been the former professor and head of pediatrics and medical education, dean, vice principal and acting principal CMC Ludhiana, founder director CMCL FEMA Regional Institute Ludhiana, former convener MCI Nodal Center for Faculty Development, Dr. BC Roy National Awardee. He has received several other coveted awards like the National Board of Examinations Excellence Award, the IMA Medical Education and Research Award, IGNO Gold Medals for Higher Education and Human Resource Management. Sir is a visiting professor for over 8 universities and colleges, national convener of the Advanced Course in Medical Education, MCI, member expert group MCI for new curriculum, as well as CISP, that is Curriculum Implementation Support Program 1 and 2. He has the International Fellowship in Medical Education as well as is a FEMA Fellow. Team member of the Obama Singh Knowledge Collaboration MUHS, an expert at the National Board of Medical Examiners, US, India Ambassador at Association for Medical Education in Europe, that is AMI as we know it. Sir has expertise in human resource development, distance learning, student assessment, student mentoring. Sir has four books to his credit, namely The Principles of Medical Education, Principles of Assessment in Medical Education, Humanities in Medical Education, and Thesis Writing. He has contributed 75 chapters. Sir has 306 publications, 4 orations, and 10 monographs on competency-based medical education to his credit. Let us, ladies and gentlemen, have the man himself here. We welcome wholeheartedly our very own Tejinder Singh sir to deliver the Dr. Rita Sood Memorial Oration this evening. Sir.
Thank you, Purnima. If you stop your screen sharing, then I can.
Right, sir.
Is my screen visible?
Not yet, sir.
Now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. So a very good evening, friends. And I'm grateful to Dr. Sanjay and MU India for selecting me for this honor. I feel privileged to be talking to you on a topic which is very dear to me. And in fact, when I started my medical education training at Maastricht, faculty development was the major area where I was concentrating along with Professor C. Svender Luton and others. Before I start the oration, let me add that whatever I am today or wherever I am today has been all because of the team which has supported me all along, whether it was at Christian Medical College, Ludhiana, or later at SGRD Institute, Amritsar. I am a strong follower of the philosophy of Guru Gobind Singh, who rightly said, "Inhi ki kripa se saje hum hai, nahi moso garib karore pare." Whatever I am because of my followers. Otherwise, there are millions of people like me, more qualified, more experienced, more learned, but I am here because of my followers. So thank you once again, MU India and Sanjay. And let me begin with today's deliberations, that is faculty development, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Teaching has always been considered a noble act. As I served through some of the 6 scriptures, in fact, what I found was this Shabad, which says, "Jaise sat mandar kanchan ke usar dine, taisa pun ik sikh ko sabad sikhayega," which means teaching someone is as pious as erecting 7 temples in gold and giving them away in charity. Now that was considered the power of teaching. And it's little wonder, therefore, that many thinkers, leaders, gurus, and others have all eulogized the role of the teacher. When Kabir ji said, "Guru Gobind do khade ka ke lagu paye, balihari gur apne jin Gobind diyo bataye," I think he summarized everything which one can say about a good teacher. And this act of putting the teacher on a pedestal higher than that of the God, I have seen those times when we used to get low marks. My parents would ask me, "Why your marks are so low?" Somehow the times have changed. And now, instead of asking the student, parents actually question the teachers, why the marks are so low. Well, these are changes with which we have to live, and we have to adapt ourselves to be able to deal with these kind of changing societal perceptions and requirements. The equations are changing. There is a knowledge explosion. You would recall Professor V.P. Mishra when he gave the first oration. Then he enlightened us that every 3 days, the knowledge gets doubled. So in other words, the old practice of having a diary of 1960 vintage and bringing it to the classroom and then dictating notes to the students is no longer applicable. Not only there is an explosion of knowledge, but at the same time, there is also an easy availability of knowledge. And the printing press revolution that we saw and which changed the way the knowledge was stored and disseminated is now actually being reenacted electronically. And this makes retrieval of knowledge much easier, much simpler. Students have the latest knowledge at their fingertips in the comfort of their hostel rooms. So if we think that the students would come to our class for the sake of getting some information, then probably that would be a mistake. And during COVID era, the education itself got redefined. We have seen that it is not necessary to be face-to-face with the students to teach. At a distance, you can teach them. And they do not have to come to you for getting information. They have access to information at their fingertips. Not only it is about knowledge, but we are also seeing an increasing use of simulations and virtual reality for teaching of skills. I recall Dr. Challam, one of the members of the expert group. And when his son went to US for surgical training, before he started from here, he got a packet in post in which there was some material which he had to suture in front of a video camera so that people sitting in the US could see that and notice what all improvements this person needs when he comes here to join the residency program. So this increasing use of simulations has actually reduced the dependence of the students and teachers, both, on the hospitals and more so on the real patients. So what does it imply? That because of these plus many other social changes, the medical practice has also changed. Most of the medical colleges are turning into big and bigger ICUs, which are treating rare and rarer cases. Cases which a student is unlikely to see again in his life, but unlikely to see the cases which he is going to see throughout his life. When I was doing my residency, somewhere around 81, 82, we had a separate ward for measles. We had a separate ward for neonatal tetanus. Don't see it here. I don't think any of the fresh postgraduates in last 4 or 5 years has actually seen a case of measles or a case of neonatal tetanus. True that the incidence has gone down because of immunization and other reasons. But if there is an odd case, then these people will find it very difficult to diagnose it because they have never seen it. Same is true of many other disciplines. Inguinal hernias, for example, hardly come to medical colleges. Hydrocele don't come to medical colleges. And then there are strict timetables. For competency-based curricula, we have planned out this. Tomorrow I'm going to teach on rheumatic heart disease, but unfortunately there may be no patient on that particular day. So you have to use your ingenuity to decide how you are going to teach. And there is a almost, I would say, extinction of the primary care physicians. Everybody wants to be a specialist or a super specialist. If you have pain in the abdomen, go to a gastroenterologist. If you have headache, go to a neurologist. If you are not feeling well otherwise, go to a psychiatrist, but nobody goes to a general practitioner. Our enthusiasm and zeal to have more postgraduate seats actually made us ignore to develop a career path for primary care physicians. So what does one do after MBBS? Nothing. And it has a reflection on the teaching. Not only the patient profile and the hospital teaching material is showing a change. At the same time, there are changing educational trends. If we look at the definition of learning, a few years ago, it was if you could recall something which you could not do earlier, you have learned it. But now, and especially with competency-based curricula coming in, the concept of learning has changed. Knowing doesn't really matter. What matters is, are you able to apply that knowledge? And so as a teacher, just giving knowledge to the students is not useful or useful enough. You have to teach them how to apply it. Competency-based curricula are coming. Accreditation requirements are coming. I am sure another 5 to 10 years from now, there would be a scramble for getting accreditation, because otherwise many international bodies are going to not accept our students. And then distance and online learning, self-directed learning, which are part of the new curricula, would require a different approach and methodology on the part of teachers. You cannot just use your conventional PowerPoints and take an online class. That would be a disaster. And of course, the societal expectations have also changed. And because of this, the teaching methods, the teaching methodology, the teaching approaches, all have been affected to a certain extent. Some largely, some only marginally, but you can see that change happening all around. The society has also changed its expectations. There's a high cost of education. When I was a student, I used to pay a fees of 250 rupees a year. I believe now, even in government colleges, students end up paying 10 lakhs or so per year. Not only the cost is high, but there is commercialization. So somebody with lesser marks could get in. And we all keep on hearing those stories and reading about such instances in various newspapers. The students have changed their approach from partner in learning to consumer of services. We have paid money. We need to pass. Don't expect us to go and learn. I remember my colleague, Dr. Saiba Kukreja, telling me this little incident that in their department, she's teaching biochemistry. When they asked one of the postgraduates that, please read this, come tomorrow and we will discuss. The lady very curtly said, ma'am, why should I read? I have paid the fees. It's for you to teach me. Not only the students have converted themselves from partners to consumers, but another distressing trend has been that most of them have changed their mindset from what I call shiksharthi or learners to pariksharthis. They're more interested in getting marks, more interested in passing. Ethics, communications, empathy, professionalism, what's the use to learn when they are not going to get you extra marks in the examination? And then there are rules, regulations, judicial interventions, and so many other things which make an impact on the way we teach and the way the students learn. I share with you this meta-analysis by Haiti. I'm sure most of you must have heard about it. And here are the top 9 influences on student achievement. whether it is feedback or cognitive ability or class environment or whatever. And what is very interesting is that out of these 9, 7 are directly related to teachers and only 2 to the students. In fact, as I was looking at this list, what I found is that even this disposition to learn is also related to teachers. The kind of atmosphere and the kind of culture you create in your classroom actually decides whether the students are predisposed to learn or not. So even that goes towards teaching. So what it means is that there may be technological revolution, there may be simulations, there may be easy availability of knowledge, but the role of teacher can never be undermined. A teacher is required at almost every stage of students' learning. And therefore, it's important that we bring back the teacher to that primacy position, which he or she enjoyed many years ago. Let's have a look at what is meant by faculty development. There are many definitions depending on what one wants to include or what one wants to see. Steinert is one of the most respected names in faculty development. And she has defined faculty development as a process by which medical school faculty work systematically to improve their skills in teaching, instructional design, scholarship, personal development, and implementing a professional development plan. Now, if you look at the keywords, what it implies is that faculty development is not an isolated enterprise. I go on my own to learn something and come back to my institution probably does not qualify to be called faculty development. It has to be systematic. It has to be institutional. And it has to cover various aspects of teaching and learning. So when we look at designing a faculty development program, you have to keep many of these things in mind. You cannot leave it to individual teachers to decide what they want to learn or what they don't want to learn, which program they want to go or where they do not want to go. 20 years ago, that was in 2000, I came across this paper while at Maastricht, and this paper by Benor actually made a history of future, as we used to call in famous programs, that 20 years down the line, what would be the shape and structure of faculty development. And I think I consider myself fortunate that I've been able to really reach a point where now I am able to look back, not even 20 years, but 22 years ago, what was said about what teaching is going to be like in future. And if we go on the Benner's description, what you find is that the future medical teacher will have to perform these actions or these activities. And I'm sure you would have noticed that there is no place for information provider. So a teacher now has to look and work on different aspects. So directing to appropriate resources, for example, self-directed learning, for example, helping the student to get through the emotional labyrinth of medical education, guiding them for further learning. But interestingly, one thing which has not changed, even in 22 years, and I don't think it's going to change in next 20 years also, is assessing the performance of the student. student assessment was, is, and will remain as one of the major activities to be performed by a medical teacher. So in other words, your faculty development programs will need to keep many of these things in mind. I vaguely remember some quote which I had read, that we are trying to teach the students of today by using methods of yesterday and preparing them for tomorrow. Something like that. And this is not exactly the wordings. So we cannot really continue and keep on training the teachers to become information providers. They have to move away from that role. But at the same time, they have to continue to keep on performing their assessor role. And that is something which we need to remember and which we need to emphasize. We are fortunate to have heard Professor D.K. Srinivas, Professor Anant Narayan, Professor Setu Raman, and Avinash also last time about what happened regarding faculty development in India. The National Teachers Training Centers, they set the stage for faculty development. And I give full credit to them because they worked at a time when education was not valued in medical education. They worked at a time when there was no internet, when there were no networking, when there was no journals available for publication, and so many other constraints. So they really set the stage for faculty development in India. 2005, when FEMA regional institutes came, I think they acted as an accelerator of the whole process. So 5, 6, 8, and 14, the 4 regional institutes came. People started showing interest. But the real push that faculty development got was when the Medical Council of India started getting involved in faculty development activities. I think that one simple step of asking, have you attended a basic course in the declaration form, probably made all the difference. People started coming for the programs. For whatever reasons, that can be debatable. But the programs were not alien then. I remember some of the brilliant papers published on faculty development in India. I'm recalling offhand, so in case I forget, please forgive me. But I remember Dr. Adkoli's from Rome to Dome, and then Avinash and Payal had written in Indian Journal of Medical Science. I think Thomas also had written something on faculty development. So a lot of people wrote about what is happening in the field of faculty development. And what is interesting is that may not be fully, but to some extent, the evolution in faculty development was with the changing emphasis on learning. Let's take a quick look as to how the changes happen. In the first step, and this must be the era of 60s and 70s and 80s, when it was believed that teaching skills are standard and they must be learned exactly by everybody. And so this gave rise to the concept of checklists. Once I did a Google search, and you could get checklist containing almost 70 to 75 items of what a teacher should be performing in the classroom. And the teachers also, unfortunately, tried to follow these checklists most religiously. Jayant Vaga from Varda once told me that the first point on the checklist was uses humor. And he was to teach neonatology to his students. And poor thing couldn't think of a joke related to neonates. So then he invented some joke. It's a creature who takes from one end, takes from other. Something like that he invented. But he had to tell a joke because it was there on the checklist. It was also felt, although I've written criticism and feedback, but I think it was mainly criticism, which helps in improving the teaching behavior. So much so that a simple, inexpensive, useful technique like micro teaching got branded as an exercise of putting a teacher under the microscope so that his faults can be seen. And the end result of all this was that good teaching was considered synonymous with good delivery. What you say was not really important. How you said was important. Now, shortly, we moved on to another era. And during this era, the focus changed. So rather than having standardized teaching methodologies, we started talking of selecting teaching skills based on how students learn. So it was not necessary that every teacher has to take a lecture or every teacher has to have small group discussions or so on. Depending on the objectives, depending on the requirements, depending on the educational justification, you could select a teaching method. And most of the teaching faculty development programs during that time, and this would be, I would say, somewhere around 90s to 2010 or so, they focused on construction of new knowledge by the teacher rather than simply transmission of knowledge. So this change from behaviorist approach to constructivist approach was the hallmark of this period. And more importantly, from the earlier presumption that good teaching is synonymous with good delivery, the perception shifted towards good teaching being synonymous with good learning. I mean, what is the use of having a very scholarly lecture if your students cannot learn? That simply doesn't work. And then we came to the third phase. I would say started somewhere around 2010 or 15, when we started looking at the role of the mind of the teacher in deciding educational techniques. We had heard of professional identity formation of doctors, but there were not many research papers or studies related to professional identity formation of teachers. How does a trainee teacher evolve into a mature teacher? Was something which was not really researched well. And this got reflected in the changing trends in teacher training. So from the earlier phase, when we had that micro teaching as putting the teacher under the microscope, in the second phase, when we had micro teaching version 2, where we had 2 plus points and 2 suggestions for improvement. And then we moved on to micro teaching 3, where we used the power of reflections to promote metacognition about teaching. Now, although we can divide the changes into 3 distinct, but let me hasten to add that not all programs actually moved along the same continuum. We still have some programs which are stuck at the first level, and we have some programs which are exclusively going on to the third level. So there is a various combination of approaches, the philosophies, the underlying thought process, and expertise of the trainers, which decide as to which phase we are going through. One of the major problems with faculty development is that the outcomes are not immediate, well-defined, or easily measured. So much so that in the first review on faculty development, which Steinhardt and colleagues wrote in 1996, they said there is no evidence that faculty development works at level 3 and 4 of Kirkpatrick. Now, this was a very quote and unquote damaging statement. But then soon people realized that absence of evidence is not really evidence of absence. We have not been able to capture those changes, but they are there. Our study, for example, which we did on Famer Fellows, and we included them over a period of 1 year from Ludhiana and from GSMC Famer and from South African Institute. So we found that the self-efficacy beliefs of the teachers improved with faculty development activities. Other researches showed that it changes the way a teacher conceptualizes and promotes learning. Change from transmission to connectionist, I think that's one of the major outcomes of faculty development programs. And then they also gave rise to intrapersonal and interpersonal development. So faculty development was something which couldn't be measured in numbers, which required a lot of qualitative research to find out as to what works, how it works, and how it can be made better. One of the obstacles, if I may use that word, in making faculty development uniform is that many teachers, especially those who are say around 50s and 55s, are very skeptical to accept any change in teaching methodology. I still remember the first teacher training workshop that we conducted at CMC Ludhiana. Of course, there were senior faculty members with me, but I was that time only a 2 years assistant professor. And one of the participants during valedictory, and he was a retired brigadier, he was candid enough to say that when I came for this program, मैं सोच रहा था ये कल का छोकरा हमको क्या पढ़ाएगा. But now I realize that there are a lot of things to be learned. And so this difference in expert and experienced is something which we need to be aware of and something which we should be looking for. If you look at the various aspects of teaching, or if you classify them into bigger headings like guiding learning, providing feedback, student mentoring, looking for student outcomes, experts stay higher than experienced teacher for almost all the points that you should be looking for as an outcome of faculty development. Now, when we talk of faculty development, there's often a conflict between what is called training and development. When we say training, it's just like, plugging in the lamp in the electric holder and the bulb glows. But when we talk of development, then probably something different is needed. So if we look at the two paradigms, the training paradigm and the development paradigm, then according to training paradigm, people can be classified into trained and untrained. You have done basic workshop, you are trained. You have not done, you are untrained. And once trained, your status changes. So you move from this group into another group. And once you have trained them, then nothing more is needed. It's not bad. Let me admit that, because you can impart training in a limited time to a large number of people at a relatively lower cost. And what was thought, or rather what is thought, that the institutions or organization's responsibility is only to provide or arrange for training. So we will have a basic workshop in our institution, or we'll sponsor some of the faculty from our institution to a regional center or nodal center to go and do the basic course. Medical schools, on the other hand, are often reluctant to send people for training. They won't mind a faculty going abroad to learn about interventional radiology. They won't mind going and learning about non-invasive cardiological techniques. But when it comes to learning about teaching techniques, then it's not that enthusiastic. And even when they send with expectations which are actually difficult to meet. Now, to have higher pass rates or more marks for the students, more number of distinctions is not something which faculty development really aims to work. In fact, my hypothesis is that as teachers become more aware of assessment, as teachers become more aware of performance ratings, initially the marks may actually go down. It's only later on that when they change their teaching methodologies and teaching approaches, that students would start showing higher marks. And actually high and low marks are related more to the quality of question papers rather than to the quality of teaching. The changes which happen because of training are visible. You go for interventional radiology, you come back and you demonstrate that you have performed a procedure successfully. But same doesn't happen when you go for a teaching training and come back and demonstrate that, yes, I have done it successfully, because it takes time. It's not implicit. Another problem which we often face is how to measure the effects of faculty development. As I told you, most of the research on faculty development is at level 1 and 2 of Kirkpatrick. Reactions and learning. That's all we want to see. Venue was very good, food was very good, sightseeing was very good, place to stay was very good, and a few questions. And then we show the bar diagrams, pre-test and post-test, and be happy. I still remember, and I hope Dr. Jamkar would also remember this, when in one of the MUHS meetings, he asked me, for so many years, you people have been teaching teachers about assessment. Tell me, has the quality of our question papers become better? I had no answer. Why this has happened? It's because we have given them a rocking chair. There is activity, something is happening. They enjoy, everybody enjoys it, sitting on the rocking chair. But it doesn't take us anywhere. We are where we were. So we may be able to talk few technical terms about assessment. We may be able to talk about the validity and reliability, but when it comes to actually using the concepts in our day-to-day life, in the workplace, it's probably not happening. This is, of course, my personal viewpoint with whatever I have seen around me in various institutions. Now, training has to be applied at the workplace. And this is what is called transfer of training. Let me use this simple example to explain it. You have brought a saucepan, poured some milk into it, and kept it on the gas flame to heat the milk. Now the flame heats the saucepan, and then the expectation is that saucepan will transmit this heat to the milk, which will get heated. Now imagine a situation where the pan is getting hot and hot and hotter, but it is not transmitting that heat onto the milk. How frustrating it would become for everybody. Waste of resources, waste of time, waste of energy. And not only in India, across the globe, transfer is a major issue in training literature. Considering that training is costly. You have to send somebody else has to do the work for that person. There is travel cost, there is staying cost, there are fees for the training, and so many other things. All this can be justified only when people come back and apply the concepts on the work. If that doesn't happen, then I think all the training is going waste. I'll try to make it a little more clearer with the example of CISP training. This is a recent paper going to come in this month's International Journal of Applied and Basic Medical Research. So what we did is we looked at the stages of concern of 744 medical teachers spread across 11 medical colleges in the country. As I said, this study was not planned to see the effect of CISP. It's just by the way that we could come across this finding. And what you notice here is that the score of stages of concern for those who have attended CISP and those who have not attended CISP are actually running superimposed. And it is only in stage 4, 5, and 6 that you see CISP attendees scoring better. But if you look at the profile, this would still be typically classified as interested but non-user. Now, of course, this data is 2 years old, and maybe during these intervening 2 years, again, changes have happened. But we may have been able to give them some knowledge, give them some skills. But have we been able to put it in practice remains a question. If you simply look at pre and post test scores in case of CISP training, you would still end up with towers, initial 2 and later 9. But when it comes to using it on the job, then probably we may be lacking somewhere. Now, contrasted to the training program, let's look at the developmental paradigm. Training is one way. You give them skills, you give them information, you give them knowledge. But for development to take place, the person needs to unlearn the old practices. Many of you must have read that story of the Chinese monk who was having a cup full of tea. And when somebody else came to add little more tea to it, he just spilled the old one and then took the new tea. He said, if my mind is already full of old ideas, where do I put new ideas? It requires building connections between what is known and what is new. More importantly, when you acquire new behaviors, let's take that example. You have learned how to plan an interactive teaching, or you have learned how to conduct an OSCE or mini CX, for example. Now, initially, you will not be perfect. You will be clumsy. It will sound very awkward sitting there watching the resident. I recall one OSCE session which we conducted for faculty at Medical College Bhopal. And at one of the station where one of the students came and I was the observer, he had 5 minutes at that station. For 1 minute or so, he kept on doing something. Finally, he threw down his paper and said, I cannot work with somebody just watching me like this. So it's not just giving training. It requires support. It requires practice. And then when your colleagues who have seen all this come and tell you, हम तो पहले ही कहे थे ये नहीं चलेगा यहाँ पे, then there's a big problem. And development paradigm is actually implicit. It's not tacit. It's not visible outside. And I say it many times. It's not that you peep into somebody's classroom and just looking at how that person is teaching, you will say, oh, train. And somebody else, oh, untrained. That's not possible. There's no difference in the way probably both would be teaching outwardly. But there would be a lot of difference between, as I discussed earlier, the approach, the beliefs, the epistemology of teaching. Now, another major problem with development is the relapse. Just like a disease, typhoid, you inadequately treat, or you don't support the patient after the fever has come down, there can be a relapse. Same way, I'm sure all of you have experienced this. When you went for a training, any medical education training anywhere, and when you came back, you tried to apply some of those concepts in your work. It went on for maybe 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Again, you left it and came back. The students were not appreciative, the colleagues were not supportive, your departmental head was not supportive, the institution was not supportive. You said, Doctor Sahab, syllabus khatam karo, chodo ye sab. So everything is killed. And therefore, contrasted to training where organization simply has to send people for training, in developmental paradigm, the organizational responsibility is to provide a training and to provide a culture where such training can be used. If your culture doesn't support innovations, if your culture doesn't support teachers learning something from outside and coming and applying in your institution, then you would kill training. Let me illustrate it by the story of Arjun. Now, we all know Arjun had learned almost everything about archery and from the best teachers. Bhisham Pitama, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, Balram. In fact, he was the only person in history which I could make out who went to the heaven living to learn the art from Indra and Mahadev and then come back to earth. If we talk in today's term, he had done everything, short-term training, long-term training, fellowships, apprenticeship, clerkship. Well, he had done everything. But when the time to apply that training came, he gave up. He simply gave up. And at that point of time, Krishna didn't tell him, okay, you don't want to fight, so go for another fellowship, come back, and then we'll have the war. No, he didn't do that. What he did? He discussed his attitudes. Now, this dialogue between the two, which must have lasted at least 2.5 to 3 hours, because it spans over 18 adhyayas and 300 shlokas. And what is very interesting, that this dialogue, which was to encourage Arjun to join the war, doesn't discuss war at all. What it discusses? Everything except war. Because what Krishna needed to change was not Arjun's skills. What he needed to change were his attitudes. And unless this attitudinal change can come, most of the training would not be applicable at a time when you need it most. I refer to one of our other research studies. And this was based on a theory of planned behavior. What theory of planned behavior says is that this intention to transfer what you have learned outside is actually based on three factors. One is the subjective norm. That means the Gazette notification, NMC letter, university letter, what other college is doing, what other department is doing. So depending on that, you decide your course of action. Oh, everybody is doing, so I should also do. Second is perceived control over behavior. You ask me to use PowerPoints, but I don't feel comfortable making slides or speaking without reading from the PowerPoint. So I may not really use it. And third is the attitude towards behavior. Do I think that my actions will result in an improvement? Do I believe that this is useful for the students to learn? Then I would use it. And if you look at the results, subjective norms have the lowest contribution to transfer. So that means all your gazettes and circulars and letters from NMC and MCI and university probably don't matter for the individual teachers. Perceived control over behavior scores slightly better. But what has the maximum contribution is attitude towards behavior. So in our trainings, if we look back, for example, basic courses and CISP and others, what we have done? We have used subjective norms. We have tried to give them the mastery of the concept, knowledge, skills, and so many other things. But probably we have lacked somewhere in addressing their attitudes. And this is what hampers the training being brought to the workplace and being used effectively. So if you look at the various factors which are responsible for transfer, and they are everywhere, in the individual, in the training, and in the organization. Supervisor support, organizational support, peer support is very important. I recall when Rita was made in charge of CMET, that is Center for Medical Educational Technology at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Then she went to her head of the Department of Medicine to tell him that, sir, I have become in charge of CMET. And the gentleman said, ये क्या बुड्ढों वाला काम पकड़ लिया? Now, if that support is not there, you must give credit to Rita to still have worked, even with this kind of negative influences. But generally, these have a very demotivating effect on the person. Same way in training, if your training is not transfer oriented, you are not taking the condition in the local medical colleges while you are planning your training. You might be taking training with all the smart boards and other gadgets, and back at home, they don't even have an LCD projector. So how will they work? How will they apply that training? And most importantly, the attitudes and values. And during the training, the focus on attitudinal change is something which we need to keep in mind and which we need to emphasize during training. So what good faculty development programs would be? They should prepare the teacher before training. If you send a radiologist for interventional radiology, the dean or the MS or the director would tell that person, we are going to start a lab for doing this intervention. So I want that you should go learn these techniques so that when you come back, you can use this technique 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can make it available for patients. But it doesn't happen when you send somebody for medical education training. Most of you must have gone for one sort of training or another. How many of you can say that your dean actually spent some time with you telling that, look, we plan to introduce mentoring in our institution shortly, and so you should go and learn about mentoring and come back and apply? Nobody. We should use transfer-oriented approach. I gave you an example. If they do not have facilities at home and you keep on teaching with all the high-tech models, then probably it doesn't work. You should support the teacher after training. Otherwise, relapse becomes very common. The organization should provide opportunity for application. So don't discourage them. Don't say, "Hamare yahan nahi chalta ye." Tell them, okay, let's use it. Let's see how it happens. You may not be able to exactly replicate it. Like OSCE, for example. We had been using at CMC for almost 25 years. Now, if you compare it with the Hardin's OSCE or some USMLE's OSCE, it was not like that. You could make a lot of improvisations, but it worked. And that is what we need to do. We may not be able to replicate it exactly as somebody else is doing, but we can make it useful and suitable for our own purposes. In fact, it's interesting and easy to compare faculty development with immunization. Just as immunization is for a specific disease, you don't have a generic vaccine that it will prevent against everything. So same way, faculty development should be targeted. So we are focusing assessment, we are focusing MCQs, we are focusing OSCE, we are focusing mentoring, and so on. It takes time to produce its effects. And the effects can be enhanced by adjuvants. Now, what are the adjuvants for faculty development? The supervisor support, peer support, creating a culture where the teachers can apply the newly learned concept in their practice. Also remember that effects can be retarded by interfering factors. If there's a pressure of complete the syllabus, then probably nobody would apply the things which they have learned. The effects, they wane over time. It's not that you learn about MCQ once and then for rest of your life you are like a viral vaccine, not requiring to learn about MCQs again. And booster shots will be required to maintain the level of immunity and level of efficacy. So if you plan your faculty development as immunization, then a lot of problems can be sorted out. Now, before I conclude, let's look at from the student's point of view, what it takes to be a good teacher. After all, what is the purpose of faculty development? Is to help the student learn better. So what do the students look for in a good teacher? And this was a study published in Academic Medicine 2008, where they interviewed a large number of students from US medical colleges. And the list that they came out was like this: medical knowledge, clinical competence, clinical reasoning, positive relationship, communication skills, and enthusiasm for teaching. Nowhere there is the methods of delivery. Nowhere is the humor. What students look for is your medical knowledge. And even today, when you remember your teachers, you remember teachers, you don't remember their methods and techniques. so-and-so sir was very good teacher. You don't say so-and-so sir used transparencies in a better. We have been comparing teacher effectiveness with good teaching skills for quite some time. And I think that's a mistake that we have been making. Teacher effectiveness depends a lot more on your domain knowledge and on your pedagogic knowledge. Can you reason out why I am using this particular method of teaching? Can you reason out why I am using this particular method of assessment? Rather than learning about OSCE and then wondering where I can use it. And of course, context of teaching. And before I conclude, I would like to recall what Abraham Lincoln said many years ago, that if I have 6 hours to chop a tree, I will spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. All of us have to sharpen our axe, irrespective of the level of experience, irrespective of the level of seniority. You have to sharpen your axe. There are a lot of things which each one of us can learn to improve our effectiveness as a teacher. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for this very enlightening, engaging, and a very thought-provoking speech. I'm sure everyone will agree that you took us to the yesteryears of faculty development. You made us peep to what is there for us in the future and presently where we stand. This was just amazing, and the kind of analogy you had used, I'm sure we will never forget all the examples for our entire life. Thank you so much. And now I would like to hand it over to Sanjay Bedi, sir, to hand over the Lifetime Achievement Award to you, sir. Thank you so much on behalf of each one of us present here today. And the chat boxes have been full, sir, with all praises.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Sanjay Bedi, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Purnima. Now I hand over the Dr. Rita Sood Memorial Award, Memorial Oration to sir. And we are really honored, sir, to be of any service to you today, tomorrow, as well as tomorrow and forever. So, and I also hand over the Lifetime Achievement Award to sir. Though sir has, I think we need him to achieve more and more, but we are once again honored to hand over this award to you, sir.
Thank you, Sanjay. I feel honored, and in all humility, I accept the award. Thank you very much.
So I think we can close the session.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.